Hi, boys and girls. Today you are in for a treat because we have 2 chapters to read, not just one. So let's get started. Chapter 5 is called Worst Birthday Ever. 9:45 a.m. Alex stared out the window of room 15. He had spent all of homeroom and most of first period thinking about that dog. But then his stomach started to growl, and by second period, he had a serious case of cupcakes on the brain. His teacher, Mrs. Hamlin, had given him a funny look when he handed her the cupcake box that morning. He had tried to reassure her that the cupcakes weren't a total loss. He figured he could scoop up the mashed remains like snowballs and mold them back into shape. Totally salvageable. They're a little smashed, but they taste fine. I tested one to be sure. She looked at the box like she was considering throwing it away, but all she did was raise an eyebrow and set it on her desk. Now Alex's stomach grew so noisy that Doug started growling back at it under his breath, which gave Quan the giggles, which goaded Doug to growl even louder, which cracked up the rest of the class but also drew a look from Mrs. Hamlin. This was a problem, because Alex was trying to figure out how he could convince her to let them eat the cupcakes now. Just as Alex was about to raise his hand and ask about the cupcakes, a runner came with a note from Mrs. Hamlin, who stepped out in the room to read it. Okay, now what I want you guys to do is I want you to make a prediction. Somebody came running into the room and gave the teacher a note for the teacher to read. And look at the time of this chapter, 9:45 a.m. Could you predict what this chapter may be about and why they had that person come running in with a note to the teacher? Let's keep going. Here we go. Alex sighed and lowered his hand. His mind drifted back to the stray dog. He couldn't explain it. After all, he'd only seen the dog for a few seconds. But when he thought about the dog, he felt the same way he'd felt when his dad put his hand on his shoulder at the air show, warm and happy and connected. That dog had really gotten under his skin. Alex gazed out the window, half expecting to see the yellow mutt waiting for him outside. Alex? He'd been daydreaming. Mrs. Hamlin stood at the front of the room, the note clutched in her hand. Pack up your bag and let's go. Alex looked around, confused. Chairs scraped as the other kids gathered up their backpacks and shuffled toward the door. The classroom was already half empty. Alex, did you hear me? You're to pick up your sister from room 4B and go straight to see your mother at work. Now? Yes, now. What, we're leaving? Yes, we're finishing early today. But what about the box? What box? My cupcakes. Oh, just leave it. But it's my Alex Douglas, not another word. We'll do it another day. Now let's go. The one other time Alex could remember getting sent home early was when someone set off a stink bomb last year in the girls' bathroom. The smell was so gross that even the teachers were running outside, staggering around the playground and gasping for air. He heard 6 kids in the class next to the bathroom couldn't even make it to the trash can and puked all over their desks. School was canceled while they aired out the building that day. But it still smelled like rotten eggs for an entire week. The only person who seemed to think it was hilarious was Jordan. Maybe Jordan was behind this, too. Alex sniffed the air, but he couldn't detect anything stink bomby. He looked over at Dougie and Quan. What gives? They shrugged. Mrs. Hamlin hurried them out the door. Her face looked bloodless, as gray as fireplace ash. When he tried to catch her eyes, she looked away. He gave one last glance at the box of mangled cupcakes on her desk, then gave up and headed for the door. Next to the door hung the class calendar. He stared at the words written there in big green letters. Alex's birthday. The date was even circled, September 11th. 2001. Chapter 6 is called The Man in the White Shirt. The time is 8:44 a.m. Now, before we begin this chapter, I want to go back to the last chapter, and I want you to see it was 9:45 a.m. Now, this book, you're going to notice, is going to be cutting back and forth to different time periods. So you have to kind of keep up with us about who's this chapter about and what is the time period. Now, remember, the worst birthday ever was at 9:45 in his classroom. But now when we look at our next chapter, it's about an hour earlier, 8:44 a.m., The Man in the White Shirt, chapter 6. Let's go ahead and begin. So now we're going about an hour earlier. Earlier that morning, across the river in lower Manhattan, a man in a white shirt made his way to the underground mall beneath the World Trade Center towers for coffee and a bagel, his usual morning pick-me-up. Standing in line, he smiled to himself as he noticed all the other men dressed like him. White shirt, sleeves rolled up, dark pants, tie. The concourse was bustling with workers from the floors above who'd come down for a break, while new waves of commuters poured off the trains from the level below. At 8:45 a.m., the man in the white shirt bit into his bagel and hit the button for the elevator. He checked his reflection in the elevator doors. At 8:46, he felt the building shake. People near him looked around anxiously. What was that? Did you feel that? He walked back to the concourse to see what was going on. The place was buzzing. Storekeepers hovered nervously in doorways. What happened? What happened? And then it hit. A fireball exploded out of the elevator shaft, blowing the doors off of the elevator where the man in the white shirt had just been standing. Instantly, there was pandemonium as a concourse filled with inky black smoke. A bank of lights flickered and went out. Sprinklers overhead came on, showering the crowds as they surged for the exits. Stay calm! Fire! Fire! It's a bomb! Someone shouted. Then another rumor took hold and raced through the crowd like wildfire, until it was repeated so often that it sounded like truth. But the man in the white shirt couldn't believe it. He cut through the crowd and found a Port Authority police officer urging people to keep moving for the exits. What happened? He asked. An airplane just hit the building. And that is the end of chapter 6, called The Man in the White Shirt. And we're going to be picking up with chapter 7 tomorrow. And we'll see you then. Have a great night. Bye-bye.